Welcome to your custom deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're jumping straight into a stack of sources you've provided us, mostly articles from CoinMarketCap contributors, and they all seem to be published on June 2nd, 2025.
Right, so a very specific snapshot in time.
Exactly. Our mission really is to quickly pull out the most important nuggets from this specific set of articles.
See what they might imply, what the collective picture looks like for crypto right now, based just on these sources.
And, right off the bat, something pretty specific catches the eye. It's about one of the really big networks.
Yeah, it's fascinating. One of the first pieces we looked at, it's from Cointribune EN, and it immediately raises a potential concern, a big one.
Okay, let's unpack that. The title itself is pretty stark, isn't it? Yeah. Crypto. Ethereum's Pectra update could be exploited by hackers.
It really doesn't pull any punches. The source makes a very direct claim here that the upcoming Pectra update for Ethereum potentially carries this risk. Hackers might exploit it.
And the source goes into detail on how.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't really elaborate on the technical specifics of the update itself or the potential exploit, but it distinctly flags that possibility based on their reporting.
That's still a pretty significant claim to see surface like that.
Yeah.
So, just to be clear, according to this one article, there's a reported potential technical risk with Ethereum's next big upgrade, Pectra.
Correct. And interestingly, if we look at another source you provided, the picture around Ethereum gets, maybe more complex, even a bit contrasting.
Ah, are you talking about the market flows report? There's a source mentioning findings from CoinShares, right?
Precisely that one. That CoinShares report, as cited in the source material, it highlighted a pretty significant surge, $286 million flowing into crypto funds recently.
Wow, okay, $286 million.
Yeah. And the source is explicit. ETH was the asset that topped the purchases. It saw the most inflow during that period.
Okay, hold on. So on one hand, we have this source flagging a potential, let's call it a fundamental technical risk for Ethereum with Pectra. But on the other hand, you've got data cited showing substantial money coming into the market. And investors are specifically buying up ETH more than anything else.
That juxtaposition, just based purely on these sources, is quite notable, isn't it?
It really is.
And the report mentioned, it also gave a little context around this inflow. It described the week as, fluctuating. You had these investment inflows happening, but also continued selling pressures alongside them.
So it suggests a market kind of wrestling with different forces at the same time.
Exactly. It certainly paints a picture of diverse activity, even just looking at Ethereum and the flows around it. Big money coming in, but selling pressure too. And then this specific claim about a potential tech vulnerability.
It does raise that interesting question, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How news and potential risks like this are, maybe digested or if not immediately digested by the people actually putting capital to work.
Yeah, it really shows that market narratives and, where the money's going, they don't always move in perfect sync with technical developments or potential warnings.
Okay, so let's pivot a bit. Moving away from the big picture flows in Ethereum for a moment. What do these sources tell us about what's happening with specific altcoins? It sounds like a really varied landscape.
Oh, absolutely. Very varied. Take Shiba Inu, for example. One source describes its current status as oversold and stuck, price-wise.
Oversold, so meaning the price dropped a lot. Maybe heavy selling.
Typically, yeah. Suggests significant selling pressure has been high, and the price isn't really recovering much. And that seems to line up with the sentiment reported in that same source.
Okay, what does it say about sentiment?
It reports investor sentiment around ESH isn't strong. It mentions sell-offs picking up and just weak market momentum kind of shaking confidence. The source suggests, maybe investors moving on.
So struggling sentiment there. But not everyone's sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Right? What about the bigger players, the whales?
Right. The same source that talks about ESH's struggles also points out that whales are actively shifting their plays, making new bets.
Ah, okay. Any examples?
Yes, it gives a specific one. It mentions a notable $560,000 bet placed on a project they call a viral altcoin, Unilabs.
$560,000
Yeah.
on Unilabs. See, that's where it gets really interesting. These specific examples, it brings it to life.
Exactly. So large investors aren't just dormant, they're redeploying capital, often into, newer or maybe more hyped projects.
What else stands out among the other altcoins mentioned in these sources?
Well, we see mentions of others with sort of different narratives driving attention. SUI is highlighted. It's apparently riding L2 hype.
L2 hype,
Okay.
layer 2 scaling solutions, right?
Yeah.
Helping with transaction speed, and cost.
That's the idea. So SUI is seemingly benefiting from that excitement. Then there's Monero XMR. The note is simply that it stays private, referencing its continued focus on privacy features.
Right, its core identity. And then we also have mentions of some newer projects positioned as potential future opportunities by these contributors.
Yes, definitely. One source specifically discusses BlockDAG. It even mentions a price point, 0.00 unETH.
Okay, and the context.
It's highlighted within what the source calls rising market optimism overall, and it gets compared to some established names like Binance Coin, BNB, Turon TRX, and Near Protocol. The contributor suggests it could be a potential next big break or even the best crypto to buy now.
Interesting positioning by that contributor. So, framing BlockDAG as an opportunity in an optimistic market, was there another newer project mentioned? Something still in pre-sale?
Yes, Qubetics. It's highlighted as quietly emerging as a top crypto presale. The source details some significant momentum there, citing over $17.5 million raised so far, just in its brief.
17.5 million plus.
Yeah.
Wow. Does the source say why it might be getting this traction?
It does. It specifically points to its focus on a real-world tokenization platform that's cited as the main driver for the presale success and its potential as a top emerging project.
Real-world tokenization, putting real-world assets on the blockchain. That's definitely a theme we've seen gaining traction generally. And sort of tucked away in these sources, there was also a very specific event noted happening on Solana.
Oh, yeah. One source specifically included a detail about a launch by Moonshot on the Solana blockchain, something called FUCK Cone.
Right.
And it notes its market cap standing at $9.6 million. It's it's a very specific and maybe for some an unexpected kind of event to see included, but it shows the sheer range of projects and activities happening out there.
It certainly does. That's quite a mix, isn't it? Specific project updates, sentiment reports, whale activity, new launches, all across the altcoin space. Before we try to tie this all together, there was also a brief mention of a macro event, something about global tensions.
Yes, that's right. One source included a point about China issuing some kind of warning amid ongoing U.S. tensions.
Okay. And did it explicitly link this to crypto markets?
It did, yeah. The source makes the claim that this action, quote, impacts crypto markets and assets.
But does it say how?
No, that's the key thing. It doesn't provide any detail on how it believes this geopolitical event impacts the market. It just states that it does.
So it just highlights that external global events are seen by, well, at least by some contributors, as factoring into the crypto space somehow, even if the connection isn't spelled out in these particular articles.
Exactly. It's just another layer mentioned in the source material.
Okay. So drawing from all these different pieces then, what picture emerges from this very specific snapshot, this collection of info from June 2nd, 2025? What's it collectively telling us based just on these sources?
Well, I think what these sources, taken together, really offer you is it's a diverse look at different forces seemingly at play in the market just on this one day. We saw that specific source flagging a potential technical risk for a major network, Ethereum, with Pectra.
Right, while other information highlighted huge capital inflows into ETH specifically through those market funds.
Yeah, those conflicting signals around the same big asset. It shows how different types of information are just circulating out there at the same time.
And then we move into the altcoins. We saw some, like SI, apparently struggling with sentiment.
While others, like SUI, are maybe benefiting from broader trends like L2 height. And then you have these specific projects like BlockDAG and Qubetics being highlighted by contributors as potential opportunities, sometimes driven by these emerging themes, like the real-world tokenization mentioned for Qubetics.
And we can't forget those very specific, maybe surprising events like that FUCK coin launch on Solana. It just shows the variety of activity.
Absolutely. And all of this is sort of overlaid with that brief mention in just one source about macro geopolitical tensions also having some kind of impact.
It really does reinforce how multifaceted and frankly complex it is to track the crypto space, doesn't it? You're dealing with potential tech risks, big investment trends, individual project performance, sentiment shifts, hype cycles, these external global factors, all potentially interacting in ways that are, well, hard to fully untangle just from a snapshot like this.
Yeah, this stack of sources, even though it's brief, it gives you a concentrated look at how these different layers of information coexist and how they might influence the market on any given day, at least based on the perspectives these particular contributors chose to highlight.
Right, and that brings us towards the end of this deep dive, focused purely on the material you provided. We've pulled out the core information points from these specific articles, all dated June 2nd, 2025.
Yep, covered the potential Ethereum vulnerability, the big ETH inflows, the varied stories among altcoins like Shiba, Unilabs, SUI, Monero, BlockDAG, Qubetics.
That specific Solana launch, the whale plays, the emerging themes, and that brief macro note. We've extracted those key nuggets.
And tried to connect the points that these particular sources presented.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider building just on the snapshot we've discussed. Given this mix, reported potential tech vulnerabilities on a huge network like Ethereum.
Alongside significant investment inflows seemingly undeterred by those reports, at least immediately.
Plus, this widely varying performance and sentiment across different altcoins, and these new projects emerging focused on themes like real-world tokenization. How do you weigh these different types of information, the different opportunities and risks they might represent in the market, based just on this specific set of sources from that one day? Something to think about.